I want to start with what is surely the biggest game changer since we last gathered here, which is October 7th. The Hamas attack on Israel, the Israeli response in Gaza, war in the Middle East. Our ambassador at the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, said this week, and I quote, that negotiations on a ceasefire are trending in the right direction. Is she right? And on what is that based?
Well, first of all, good morning, everyone. And it's wonderful to be here back in Aspen and with this remarkable group. Yeah, there's a lot going on, and the Middle East is front and center. What Linda said is right. I believe we're inside the 10-yard line and driving toward the goal line and getting an agreement that would produce a ceasefire, get the hostages home, and put us on a better track to trying to build lasting peace and stability.
And again, on what is that based?
It's based on two things.
Hope.
Yes, because hope's good, but it's insufficient. No, it's based on reality. And the reality is this. A month ago, President Biden put out a detailed proposal for getting to a ceasefire, the release of hostages, and the ability to move forward. And what happened after that was quite extraordinary. The entire world came together in support of that proposal. Country after country standing up and endorsing it. The United Nations Security Council, where Linda did a tremendous job, coming together, something we don't see that often these days, 14-0 with Russia abstaining, in support of that agreement. And the result was, after a lot of pushing and diplomacy in the weeks after that, we have an agreement to the framework the President put out by both Israel and Hamas. The question now is finishing the negotiation of some critical details that are important.
Well, and that Hamas hasn't signed on. Have they?
Well, no, they've signed on to the framework.
Right.
And that's what's so important. But there remain some issues that need to be resolved, that need to be negotiated. We're in the midst of doing exactly that. And by the way, when I say we're inside the 10-yard line, we are. Now, we also know that with anything, the last 10 yards are often the hardest. Yeah. So I don't want to be in any way naive about it, but based on everything we've been doing for these last now really 6 months, because starting in January, we believed and we continue to believe that the quickest way to bring this war to an end, to bring relief to the people of Gaza who so desperately need it, to put Gaza itself, to put the entire region on a better path, is through an agreement on a ceasefire and a hostages. So that's actually the quickest way to get it done.
Netanyahu will be in D.C. on Monday.
Right.
What's your big ask of him? What would count as a successful visit?
Well, I think we need to make sure of two things. We, of course, want to bring this agreement over the finish line, but while that's necessary, it's also not enough, because what's critical once we get it, assuming we do, is to make sure that there's a clear plan for what follows, the so-called day after plan. Because what we can't have is this. What we can't have is an agreement that's followed by some kind of void that will either be filled, if it's there, by Hamas coming back, which is unacceptable, by Israel prolonging its occupation of Gaza, which they say they don't want to do and is unacceptable, or just having a vacuum that's filled by lawlessness, that's filled by chaos, which we see in so many parts of Gaza right now, which is also inimical to actually helping people who desperately need it. So, making sure that we have a plan in place, which we've been working on also every single day with Arab partners, with Israel, with many others, for governance, for security, for humanitarian assistance, for reconstruction, that's critical. And I imagine the discussions with the Prime Minister will center around that.
And have you figured out how to deal with Netanyahu? I mean, the administration has tried the bear hug, unwavering support. You tried pressure and withholding 2,000-pound bombs. Where are you now?
I'm not focused on personalities, I'm focused on policies. And we want to make sure as we go forward with anyone, whether it's our Israeli allies or anyone else, that we reach agreements on the concrete steps to be taken to move whatever it is we're trying to move forward.
I'll ask it a slightly different way. Have you figured out what Netanyahu wants? Do you give any credence to the view among many analysts in Israel that he would actually kind of like to slow walk or even thwart a ceasefire and hostage deal because the far right in his coalition oppose it, and it could cost him his job.
What I'm seeing, what I'm hearing across Israeli society is a strong desire to get this done, to get a ceasefire, to get the hostages home after so many months, including, and it's often forgotten here, American hostages. I've met with the American hostage families and other hostage families, I don't know, 10, 12 times. So the president has, Jake Sullivan has, many others in our administration have. So this is real and personal to so many of us, but for the Israeli people, bringing people home is their number one priority. And I believe getting a ceasefire is something that most Israelis support. At the same time, we have to get this because the suffering of people every single day, innocent men, women, and children, who've been caught for the last 9 months in a crossfire of Hamas is making, that has to end too.
Yeah. I appreciate you reminding all of us of the obvious that these are real humans and lives at stake, because that is clearly important and at the center of this. One more on the Middle East. Is the two-state solution dead?
Not only is it not dead, it can't be.
It's very hard to find a path to optimism, given that Israelis are now resisting it, government, ordinary people. Gaza is destroyed. Settlers are taking more land in the West Bank. Where does that leave room for hope?
You know, John McCain used to say that it's always darkest before it goes completely black. So
we miss him every day.
If you keep that in mind, it's not bad guidance for the work that we're all trying to do. But look, there's some fundamental realities that we can't escape. The fundamental realities are these. Between Gaza and the West Bank, there are somewhere over 5 million Palestinians. There are about 7 million Israeli Jews. Neither is going anywhere. Palestinians are not going anywhere. The Jews are not going anywhere. There has to be an accommodation, but an accommodation that does two things, that brings lasting peace and lasting security to Israelis who so desperately want it and need it, and fulfills the right to self-determination of the Palestinians. Now, with any right comes responsibility. Responsibility to build a state that would not be a threat to Israel, that won't be a Hamas stand, that won't be like Lebanon with Hezbollah actually dominating the country. So there are important things that would need to happen in order for a state to be realized. But I believe strongly that, yes, that has to be the future. And by the way, the two strongest opponents of a two-state solution, who are they? Iran and Hamas. So the strongest possible rebuke to both Iran and Hamas would be the realization of two states. At every step along the way in the history of this, you go back to the Oslo Accords. Who tried to disrupt the Oslo Accords? Hamas. When the Arabs launched the Arab Peace Initiative and were moving toward recognition of Israel, who unfortunately effectively disrupted that? Hamas, with one of the most horrific terrorist attacks before October 7th that we've seen in Israel. So if you look at the logic of this, it's compelling. And there's something else, and I'm sorry for going on, but I think it's important. There is a different future. And we've seen its outlines in an almost embryonic form, but it's there. A different future for Israel that realizes maybe its number one objective since the founding of the state, and that is its acceptance in the region, having normal relations with all of its neighbors. Yeah. We see that through the work that we're doing on normalization. We saw that when Iran attacked Israel. And for the first time, a direct attack from Iran on Israel, the United States, but not just the United States, European countries and countries in the region came to Israel's defense. So we can see a future where Israel is integrated in the region, it's more secure, the Palestinians realize their aspirations for a state, and the enemies of that future, Iran and its various proxies, are isolated.